Good morning, all.
Hello.
Morning.
Morning.
Good morning.
Give it a couple minutes, folks to join.
And Colin, that the email,
Mhm.
more than half of them have been verified by Street Outreach, and they're in Street Outreach for case management.
Perfect.
There's probably about 10 that are still waiting to be verified.
Okay. That's helpful. Thank you, Nicole.
You're welcome.
I know Ebony won't make it today. She's out sick, she said. Morning, Sharita.
Morning. Sorry, guys, got engrossed in work and lost track of time.
No worries.
I am trying to get a lot of stuff done in the next 3 days because after Wednesday, I'm gonna be away from work for about, well, what they told me was 30+ days. My daughter is getting ready to have some high intensity treatments that are gonna not allow me to be at work. I'm gonna be in the hospital for the next 35+ days or so. So
Sorry, Sharita.
hope to be back sometime in July.
All right. I know I shared with some of the group, Ebony's out today. She's sick.
See, we're at Quorum.
I think so. So if you want to.
So we can officially call our meeting to order now at 10:35 a.m. And the first item on our agenda is our minutes.
Yep. And I think Melissa had sent, Melissa, you're on, I think those minutes all got sent out like a while back. But I can't remember which months.
Yeah, so
You-
we have, right now, we have on the table minutes from October, November, December, and January, and they were sent in March.
Has everybody had opportunity to review those minutes from October, November, December 2022 and January 2023? I think when they came out, I read them.
I did read them when they came out and I didn't have any issues with them, so I will make a motion to approve all of those.
I second that motion. This is Jason Brenner.
All right. All those in favor, put yes in the chat, no, or okay, so we have, looks like we have approved our minutes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep. Motion carries. So now we just need February, March, April, and May's minutes. So do we think we'll have those in our next meeting, which will be August, right?
Mhm. That's the goal.
Well, May and June, I guess,
Mhm.
is to have them ready for August.
Get them all done.
All right. Unsheltered numbers is our next item, Colin.
Yes, ma'am. Give me one moment. I'll drop them in the chat. Thank you to Nicole Lamb for pulling that for us. So we have 46 unsheltered families. And Nicole was sharing half of them are currently engaged in the street outreach program. So those are at least 23 verified. There are 10 additional families that are in a waiting list to get connected to street outreach. And then the balance are kind of still in limbo, and 93 singles unsheltered. One family's going into shelter today, and 3 males are going to urban ministries.
Say that last part again.
One family is going to Families Moving Forward today. So we'll have 45 unsheltered families after that family completes intake and moves into the shelter. And three males are going to urban ministries today. So that'll drop our unsheltered to 90. And then we've got 38 families and 37 singles reporting to be at risk of homelessness within the next 2 weeks.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Colin, how do these numbers compare to last month?
I went back and looked at it, and we were up in the upper 30s, low 40s for families. Does that sound right to you, Nicole?
Yes.
And our singles tend to be hovering in that 80 to 90 range.
So it was high then too, or just
Mhm.
remaining high?
It's high.
And it gone up a little bit, creeped up.
Creeped up a little bit.
Yeah, it's definitely, we had a lot of families got evicted.
Okay, I was
It's
wondering
last
if you knew. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah. And we still have the 38 families that are at risk. A lot of them have court the end of this week and next week, and they've been working with legal aid, and we're all trying to figure it out, but they definitely are going to be having to leave in the next 14 days.
Janine, can you remind me where we are with any sort of emergency rental assistance through DSS or through the county?
What would you like to be reminded of?
Do we have any money left? I know we've spent a lot of,
We do have some. I think some of the challenges one of the biggest challenges that we face is we're almost out of our state ERAP funds. B is that we have a number of people who have exhausted all 18 months that they would have qualified for. So once they come to the end of that 18-month of assistance, there isn't any wiggle room there for us to add additional funds to that. Beyond that, there are county dollars, but county dollars don't go beyond a certain dollar amount, unlike our INCOR and ERAP funds have gone. We have asked for additional funds in the budget, but I understand that they were not approved in the county
wow.
manager's budget.
How much did you ask for? Do you remember? Like ballpark?
Well, I know we asked for right around $500 additional $1,000 in our budget.
Okay.
Yeah.
That seems like a pretty reasonable request based on
Well,
the
I
numbers.
mean, we only traditionally get between $160,000 and $180,000 total for our eviction diversion program. We've
Okay,
been spending on average, right? I mean, so far this year, we've already spent, we're going to spend a little over $5 million in FY 22-23 between our in-core dollars and the other remaining dollars that we have in other pots of money, pots being, pop out of money. Yeah. So to go from that, at one point we spent about $17 million, and then we spent about $6 million, and now we're spending almost $5 million, and then we'll go to 180,000.
oh gee whiz.
Yeah.
Let me write that down.
And some of this is, some of these unsheltered numbers can also be tied to the fact that during COVID, we had, like DSS had all that extra money for rental assistance. We had extra money to stand up additional shelter beds for
Right.
2 years, a little over 2 years. And, we kind of got used to that. Well,
Right.
that $2 million is gone. And now we have to go back to, here's what our normal allocations are.
Right.
And that's the piece where, it is what it is in the budgets, and, the budgets at this point, I'm not sure how much can be done to change budgets that are on the approval process in the next couple of weeks.
There's always a budget amendment.
Yes. Yeah. But I think that, at the same time, I'm just going to be blunt here, is that, we still have mandated services that are unfunded as well,
Yeah.
which, is going to be a challenge because, if the state sees that we are not fulfilling our mandated services, then they can step in. Rental assistance is important. No doubt we want to keep our residents housed. There is no doubt in my mind that stable housing equals stable healthcare, which is stable health, education, which is stable families, all the domino effect down the line. But as far as DSS is concerned, if we can't keep our mandated services up to the performance measures that the state has set, then we as an organization have bigger problems too.
I see.
And the request that we made, I'm not trying to ring a bell here. I'm just saying that the request that we made in order to meet the mandated services for DSS were also not included in the county manager's budget. So it's really hard to kind of stretch and pull us in so many different ways when, I asked for 10 new positions, for example, and
How many, Janine? How many?
10.
10.
I got 2 in a mid-year request, but that was because we found them internally inside of DSS. I'm not trying to just share it all, but I'm just being blunt and honest with this group as a community to understand where we as DSS are standing when it comes to being able to do this work.
I really appreciate you sharing all of that. I didn't understand all that before, so appreciate you sharing.
Of course.
So I missed part of that. I'm sorry, guys. The power went out here.
Oh, no, Sharita.
So I had to improvise. So now I'm on my cell phone because I don't know what's going on with the power. So
Did
were
you,
we still talking about, was your conversation in relation to the unsheltered numbers and DSS's perspective, or was that we had moved on?
we're discussing the amount of funding that we will have available, given the fact that we are on par to probably run out of our NC Core dollars, NC Pro dollars really, probably by the end of August or September. And that means we go back to our reset dollars, which were 180,000. Everybody remembers pre-COVID. I feel like it's like BC, before COVID. We only had $180,000 in the budget, right? So, you know, in 1 year, I think we spent close to $15,000. I think in 1 year we spent about $8,000, I think. And then this year we're almost at 5 million. I'm sorry, these are $1 million. Sorry, 15 million, 8 million, and this year 5 million. So yeah, we're going to go back to $180,000. So then we talked about, you know, what have been our asks, and we've asked for more money, but it just didn't make it into the county manager's budget, recommended budget for DSS.
Wow, I don't even think I know what to say to that, because
Yeah, I
that's
don't-
going to be a huge and significant change, because Durham is definitely a different community demographically, socioeconomically, BC, since COVID than
Yes.
we were before. And the needs are not going away because everything is going up. So people need actually more help now.
I don't know if everybody's aware, but I retire at the end of this month.
No.
Yeah, I am. I'm medically retiring, so I have to pass this baton to someone else.
But you don't know who that someone else is going to be yet, right?
I do not know just yet who it's going to be, but
Will it
you
be
know,
somebody who has the breadth of knowledge about Durham, our community, and where we are and what our needs are? You think, or is it going to be like a new person walking in the door who has to learn all of that?
I am supposed to be on the interview panels and selecting, you know, those candidates to be interviewed. So I'm hoping that we have someone who is a Durhamite or someone who works this work at DSS already. That is my hope.
And Janine's position, DSS has a seat on the HSAC. It doesn't necessarily have to be the new person who fills Janine's position. It could be somebody else within DSS. So that's something that, you know, we'll work with Janine and the DSS team to make sure that the right knowledge sets are in the right places.
Thank you, Colin.
Absolutely. And we will miss you, Janine. And thank you for
Thank
all of
you.
your help and being part of this committee and the HSAC for longer than I've been here.
Well, you know, usually when I get stuck in a slump at DSS, I usually call Janine and she helps me get unstuck. So that it breaks my heart, but you got to take care of you. So I'm definitely learning that in this season, and I understand you need to do what's best for you. We will. I know I will, but if I can take that liberty, the community will definitely miss you, whether they know who you are or not, because you help things move along and get stuck.
Thank you, Sharita.
You're gonna make me cry today.
Oh my
Woo!
gosh, don't do that. I'll find you someone to get you unstuck too, okay?
Okay.
All right, so we'll keep on keeping on with trying to find solutions to reduce these numbers. I mean, one of the things that we did talk about, and the application is now open from the state ESG office, was really targeting the rapid rehousing money and street outreach money to families. So that won't help us in the short term, as those contracts don't begin until January, but we hopefully will start to see a little bit of movement on these. And we will have to be talking about an unsheltered coordinating agency RFP that does the street outreach, as that contract will end next year. We just did an extension to keep it rolling. We were hoping HUD would have covered that cost through our special NOFO, but we were not selected for funding for that, so we had to just continue that contract. And as we look at it, what are the needs, and how do we adapt that unsheltered coordinating agency RFP to meet the new challenges as things have changed from when that was first stood up. So there may be some ways in the future to help reduce some of these numbers. That's what we'll have to keep working on.
So I've been thinking, sometimes I think in my sleep. It's bad. Just because, I every month I get these numbers. I'm seeing people, I get all kinds of calls on the weekends when stuff is closed. People don't know what to do. And for some reason, somebody thinks I know what to do, but and my thought was, when I lay down and go to sleep, maybe 2 nights ago, so how do we get ahead of this? I think that we are doing everything that we think we possibly can. Colin, you and I had a conversation last week. You remember that conversation. And, just kind of been weighing on me. And so, I keep riding through our city and I keep seeing all of the housing popping up and none of it being affordable. And I'm like, okay, what can we do? I know that we just proposed getting some more supportive services, support in our community, and trying to move forward with those asks. And so how do we get ahead of this? So the thought that came to my mind, and I don't know if a nonprofit agency has to do it, if there's some conflict with us as a continuum making an effort, but what if we went to some of these complexes? And so how when you pay your light bill, they have like that program that if you want to help pay other people's light bills, you can give a little extra money. And so my thought was, could we go to any of the existing complexes and ask them to maybe start some initiative with their tenants to maybe donate money to help support somebody in a unit or two in those buildings, financially pay their rent? So this is more of a community-based kind of response. Y'all said the power just went off again. Is whether this is something that we can do as an alternative solution or some extra thing that we can do to see if we can get people, prick the hearts of people in these housing complexes. Maybe it's the smallest unit they have, but they might be able to financially donate to it, but then we can get somebody there. But we, on our side, we commit to the supportive services piece to help that person function in the housing. Because if we don't do something else, we're never going to get ahead of this. It's like a train wreck. And we just watching it happen. And these numbers keep growing and we keep adjusting our comfort with families numbers creeping up. Remember when we were at 20 and having a fit? Now we're at 38. You know, like, and we're just breathing through it. We're just breathing through it. But this is a crisis. We know historically that, you know, research shows that children who grow up in homes where the housing is unstable usually grow up and are people who live in who have unstable housing history. This is like a train wreck waiting to happen. How do we get ahead of this? So how do we think outside the box? We have all this inventory in the community. It's unaffordable. Are there kind-hearted people in there that might want to support somebody being able to afford to live in a unit? And if we can do our part with the supportive services, can we actually make some kind of impact in our community? So, one second. Give me 1 second, you guys. Think about that, and I'll be right back.
Okay. You want to wait for Sharita to come back, or? I hope she'll be back in a minute.
All right, I'm back.
She's back. All right, there we go.
It's just a thought. How do we get ahead of this? Can we do this? If we have somebody with the, don't we have somebody with the Triangle Realtors Association who might be able to help us get some of this lead work done? What can we do? How can we put a dent in this, and how can we get some people off the street? Just a thought.
Mhm.
And we're not having to do the part of creating the housing, but using what we already have in our community in surplus.
Do you think churches would be equally philanthropic in that way, Sharita? That maybe if we went
I
to a
think it's a
congregation and-
possibility.
you know, if a congregation would, you know, basically sponsor a family.
I think it's a possibility, but I think the days of us just thinking that our same little group of people are going to be able to solve this problem, that day is over. That day was over a long time ago.
Sure.
We got to
sure.
do some corporate community, social accountability and responsibility to this issue, because it's no way that we're not gonna ever materialize all our goals if we don't do something else. So I think the first step would be getting the complexes to agree, to give us 1 or 2 units. I think that's the first step. And then figuring out financially how we could operationalize the financial assistance piece of it. But we got to do some kind of grassroots response in addition to what we're getting, because we're never going to have enough money. You're talking about DSS right now. We're not going to have enough money. We're not going to have enough money. We got to do something else.
Heidi, when we offer tax incentives for builders, developers, companies who come to this area, is there any way to include those tax incentives to offer, a penny on the dollar for their development to go towards, this cause? Is there any way to include that in a tax incentive? Because I know we offer tax incentives for businesses to come here. Is there any way to include such things?
We do offer tax incentives for corporations, like for recruitment purposes, sometimes part of a job development incentive grant with the state, sometimes just a local incentive. And we have sort of combined with that a list of community benefits that we ask the corporations to agree to, and some menu of things that they can contribute. And that helps determine whether we'll provide the incentive or not. And of course, these incentives, they are performance-based. We check them. They have to increase the tax base by a certain amount of money, which means more revenue for the county to then spend on mandated services. And also they have to provide a certain number of jobs. And if they don't, then the payout doesn't happen. So in theory, any tax incentive we get should pay for itself by the increase in the taxes that we bring in, because they increase the tax base because of their property and such that they have, and also because people are getting jobs, and of course that's income and stimulates the economy, et cetera, et cetera. But a good one, because we do have things on the list like agrees to have an on-site childcare center, agrees to provide internships, apprenticeships, agrees to work with Durham Tech to create a pipeline for our citizens to receive the training to get these jobs. And we don't have anything that I can think of or that I remember related to housing. I think it's a fantastic idea. I'll bring that up for sure.
All right.
Did you have something, Dawn? I think Tammy might have had something as well.
Oh, I was just going to agree with Sharita, but just say that one of the things that, or a couple of things that we're really trying to do recently, we've been really putting our heads together to tackle this problem, because we're getting more calls, the numbers are going up with the families. It's just reached a critical stage. So we're reaching out to our landlords that we currently have been working with and asking if they would allow us to master lease some of their units that they've not traditionally given to us when we move in someone who's previously been homeless, because sometimes it's hard to place families that have been homeless. So we're having a little bit of success there. We do have one landlord where we have an agreement to master lease at least one unit, and we're going to see how this goes, as long as we are providing supportive services to the family while they're in the unit. And FMF is standing up and saying we will also do the maintenance on the unit if you will work with us and open up more units. The other thing that we're doing is we're reaching out to some of the new developers to say, would you be willing to allocate some of your units to families because of this crisis? And if so, we've traditionally not partnered with them to show that we're partnering with some of the bigger names, maybe the Wall Street names that are coming down, but we're willing to put them on our website, do whatever we do for marketing with them if they will give us units that we can master lease and manage. So we're just trying to think outside the box. It's very difficult. We're not sure how it's going to go, but fortunately I've been able to convince some of our funders to invest in these initiatives, even though they are a little different and out of the norm. We're just trying to do whatever we can to find places for families, because it's heartbreaking. I mean, it is literally breaking our hearts. I mean, just last week there was a mom and dad with 6 kids that just wanted to use our playground, and we didn't have a place for them here. And they, we went out and said, are you on the by name list? Did you call entry point? Well, no, we didn't know. And so we were able to help them that way. But yet here's a mom and dad with 6 kids, not sure where they are on the list, that just wanted to use our playground. We couldn't let them stay here, but we said, you can stay on the playground as long as you want. And it's hard. I mean, it's really taken a toll on all of us to see this. So we're just trying to think differently, just whatever we can.
Tammy, we definitely appreciate hearing all of the creativity you guys are doing over there to get folks housed, and I'm rooting for all those efforts. But I also feel like we need to do something.
There is.
At a broader, in a broader scope.
Yep,
try to help more people.
yep, I agree.
There is the piece when developers come in to build residential units, a voluntary proffer program where developers can offer up units or contribute funds to, develop, if they don't want to include affordable housing in their units for whatever reason, they can elect to donate to develop other affordable housing within the area. It's a voluntary thing and can't be forced. And that goes back to the Dillon rule that we have to live by, is we can't force developers to put things in there. We can just sort of politely and strongly encourage.
Right, but do we know what those return on investments for those special circumstances are? Like, do we get a lot of developers saying, okay, we don't want to be in the market of doing this, but we'll help fund it? Do you have like outcomes on that? Is it successful?
I mean, you get a little bit. I don't know how much dollars and cents it goes into, from my understanding. I don't know how much of it and where it all goes, but some of it goes back into sort of the affordable housing, the dedicated housing fund that helps to develop affordable housing.
What happens when we run out of room?
When we run out of room to develop affordable housing? Well,
Because it's going fast. It's places in Durham that I never thought, like I just thought it was green space and was never going to be built on. It's either built on or there are for sale signs sitting on it. And I'm surprised.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I am surprised. So I get what you're saying. I understand that those things are out there, but we're going to run out of space. Because at this point, they're putting townhomes so they can put as many people in spaces as they can.
Density.
And none of it's affordable.
But we need that too. If we need housing in general, because the people who have the resources to, move into any of the housing that we have in our stock will take up a space that could have been more affordable for someone a little, less
But
privileged,
the balance is off. That's
but
the challenge.
we do need it all. And I do believe that the city is doing a lot to try to hold developers' feet to the fire. For example, if there is a rezoning request, the city council then can play a little hardball and say, we're not going to grant your rezoning request unless you agree to include, a certain number of affordable units. I mean, recently the South Point Mall is trying to get rezoned in order to provide a lot of housing. And those developers said they weren't including any affordable housing. And to this point, it hasn't been approved. I'm not sure where that stands. And the city of developments down 98, they're pretty controversial, but
I know, because I live down there. So I get to, none of my neighbors want affordable housing in our community. They don't want it.
Exactly.
My voice is one of a very few, and then I still got question marks because I know all the stuff that that folks that come to the area won't have. That's the reality of me working in this work, to know that there are no supportive services, that people are going to struggle. There are a lot of high needs. Do I want my 2-year-old running around potentially unsafe because of that? Which is a very difficult position to be in, but my neighbors don't want it. It's amazing when I sit in the neighborhood meetings that I go to, because that's the next area that feels like it's getting hit. So, well, I don't know what we do, but I guess we'll see what happens. I just wanted to offer that suggestion. Have we exhausted this conversation? I don't know if any of the other things on the agenda, Colin, do we really absolutely need to get to?
We have the ESGCV standards, and we've kind of, for background, we did approve a ESG-CV standards that was incorporated into our written standards. HUD during our monitoring, for some reason, didn't care for the way we did it and wanted a separate standalone document. So essentially, we found a group out of Detroit, used theirs as a model. And basically, it's one that has sort of been approved by HUD, that sort of has all the required information that HUD wants in there. So there's not a whole lot of wiggle room of things that we want to do on a local basis. It's sort of regurgitating to HUD what HUD wants us to have in there. And it incorporates all of the aspects of what could have been done with ESG-CV funds. And it's kind of one of those things that the ESG-CV funds are totally spent. The programs have ended. And now we're just going back and administratively sort of cleaning up the things that could be cleaned up in case somewhere down the line, another set of funds like this become available. We'll have the items in place. So that's something that we can talk about approving and sort of get that approved. We can do that via email. The only other thing that we do need to do is the HUD COC competition will be coming up. And that is to look at prioritizing permanent supportive housing, or how we want to prioritize the COC funds. Those are the two things that we need to do. And then I would like to talk a little bit about White Flag and also how the group would like to handle forms. I know we had talked about approving forms at a previous meeting. We'd like to sort of talk through that a little bit and see if that's something that we actually need to do, or if there's another way to go forward on some of the forms.
Are we ready to move on, or we want to continue the conversation we have been having as it relates to our numbers?
It's up to you, Madam Chair.
I'm comfortable with us moving forward. If everybody else is.
I see heads nodding.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I can't see your heads on the phones. So we need to, you send us the ESG CV standards document. That's the 19-page document, 20-page document.
And it's, for lack of a better term, a boilerplate type thing that's just sort of, here's what you can do with the funds. Here are the eligible expenses. Here's what's not eligible. Here's how it relates to this code or that code.
Is this something you want to put on the screen and go through any key points or parts?
It's up to you.
I haven't read it yet, so. I mean, I don't know if I need to necessarily read it all word for word. If there are any highlights of anything that you might want to share, unless other folks want to go through it right now. Remember, I can't see your head.
Go ahead.
I read through it, and from my understanding of it, it looks good, but there are a couple of typos. One in particular that I have a question about on page 9. Under spending timeline requirements.
Hold on, which page?
Page 9.
Okay, find it here.
It's the paragraph just above the ESG CD program components.
All right, let me get to it. Oh, page 9. It's eligible, prepare for, respond to.
Yeah, it says in the second paragraph that must be expended by September 30, 2022, but in the bullet points, it says 2023. Is that a typo?
Yeah, because, it should, I'm going to change it back to 2022.
Okay.
Because that was the original rule. And that's where extensions by HUD will override this timeline. And HUD did want these all spent by September of 2022. They later said, we'll give you an extra year. So I kind of figured we should probably leave it with the original in there. But that was one of the things to we could change it to 2023. I don't know that there's,
It's contradictory in that paragraph was the reason I was questioning it.
thank you for catching that. It's a relatively dry document.
I just found a couple other typos, but they don't change any of the context of the information like that one does. So I'm not really worried about those.
Okay. Well, if you have them and you want to send them over, that would be,
You're
Yeah,
highlighting, I can send them to you.
that'd be fantastic, and we'll clean it up. There are a couple hands working on it, and
Any other feedback from anyone else? Thank you, Helen, for reading it.
I didn't want to do my other work this morning. It's either cull through data or read this. So I thought I'd read this.
It's a pretty straightforward. It sort of goes through, and a lot of it lines up with things that are already in our written standards. It just calls out some of the specific ESGCB waivers. And, for instance, we were allowed to use volunteer incentives using ESGCB funds, or cell phones with ESGCB funds. There were a lot of different things. So it's really just sort of setting that up, and it lines up with what the providers actually did. So it's not like we're putting in rules that people didn't follow.
Okay.
They did what they were supposed to do. This just clearly articulates, these are the rules you were supposed to follow, that we had everybody following during the pandemic. We just didn't get it written into our written standards appropriately, given that we were flying an airplane and building it at the same time.
So this is an item requiring our approval for it to go forward to the full HSAC.
Yeah, I think we can go ahead and approve it if you would like to, and let the full HSAC adopt it as well.
What is the thought of the committee? Want to entertain a motion to approve it?
Well, I read it, so I can submit a motion to approve.
I can second it.
All right, looks like we're gonna move forward with a vote. All those in favor? Yes. Noes have the same right. And if any of you can go back and try to review it, I'm gonna try to review it. Just in case, when we present it in the meeting. I know what's in there. And if anybody has any questions about any of it. Colin, would there be like a little small like summary or anything of this for the full HSAC meeting?
We can,
Or will it be this in?
we will send the whole thing, but we can send a summary as well. Find a pen.
Okay.
We'll draft a little summary to go with the a summary, like in the agenda item on the agenda. We'll put it in there as a summary of what we did.
Okay. So next item is the HUD note for prioritization for PSH and referee housing.
Yes, and that was, let me pull up the memo. Lloyd had drafted a memo. About the ESG, which we already handled that one, and
Right.
this was just the COC NOFO, so that we're clear when that one comes out, because we're not sure when it'll come out. We wanted to make sure that we have our ducks in a row and we're not scrambling after it's released. So the recommendation would be that we do permanent supportive housing for persons who meet the definition of an eligible dedicated plus project should be the priority for any COC bonus funds. So basically what we're saying is, if anybody wishes to apply for a COC bonus project this year, that the recommendation would be the priority would be given to a permanent supportive housing program that would be classified as dedicated plus. And what that means is when you have a dedicated PSH program, you are only taking people who are defined as chronically homeless. And dedicated plus allows a little more flexibility if you have people who may not have the documentation ready to go into a permanent supportive housing program because they're missing some of the documentation. You'd be able to move somebody into a dedicated plus unit if they're at that, if they meet that a little less stringent criteria. So that's the recommendation for the committee to consider. The advantages, well, one, there's no guarantee we get bonus money, but two, if we did get bonus money, we would have additional permanent supportive housing units that would be open to a wider audience of
People.
persons experiencing homelessness.
Makes sense to me. Any discussion around this matter? I think this is an item requiring us to vote. Is that correct, Colin?
It is.
So just to be clear on the definition, so this bonus project for the permanent supportive housing for chronically homeless, it doesn't include those with the medical disability or with the disability portion that HUD has in its definition.
It would allow flexibility. I'm trying to remember not having the definitions in front of me. That sounds correct, Tammy.
Okay.
It's basically, you might have the length of time homeless, but not have the certifying disabling condition.
Okay. So it's broader.
Yeah, it's a broader, the dedicated plus allows you to serve kind of where PSH dedicated is have to have the disabling condition and the length of time homeless. The dedicated plus allows a little bit more flexibility with one or the other.
Okay. Well, then I would make a motion to approve this.
I have a motion on the floor. I'll entertain a second.
I'll second it.
Who was that?
Second by
Helen.
Helen.
Timmy and Helen, y'all on the road there.
We are just doing it today. What is with that? And it's Monday. That can't be right.
So all those in favor, you have the right to agree, disagree, or abstain. So move forward a recommendation given to us by staff. All right. Looks like our motion carried.
The next item, Madam Chair,
Uh-huh.
is we were talking about forms, and there's a whole lot of like client checklist form, and these like HUD has these things that are required that really we as a lead agency are kind of responsible for developing. And the question I wanted to bring to the committee is, one, does the committee want to approve every single form that is required of all subrecipients to use? Because when we take it to the committee, it would be approved by the committee. Then we have to also go back to all the providers and do a training on how to use the form and what's required in it, how to use it, where it needs to be. And then if we needed to modify the form at any point, we would follow the same process. Does this committee prefer to follow that route on these forms? Because these are forms that are almost, for lack of a better term, they're kind of boilerplate. Like HUD requires that you have an intake document and you have this document and you have this document. And whether or not it's a good use of the committee's time to approve what HUD tells us we have to have? Or would the committee feel comfortable allowing the lead agency to roll forms out, train the people who have to use them administratively, and sort of keep the committee informed and abreast of what's happening? It just kind of we had talked about approving all the forms and documents, and these are just standard checklists, for lack of a better term.
If, so any forms that we create at the systems level, will they become like an addendum to some master document that we have? Like, would you be able to find it somewhere, see it?
Yeah.
So for example, let's say you guys do a form, a provider feels some way about the form or thinks that it's a different, like,
Mhm.
and they appeal to the H, like in that regard, I feel like we need to see it.
Sure.
But do I want us to be approving every single form? Absolutely not. So, in my mind, if it became some addendum to what our standard protocol is, where like if somebody was just curious and wanted to go look at it and get it and pull it up, they could, then that would make sense to me. I don't know what everybody else thinks.
And I think that's what we would end up doing, because a lot of these tie back to specific projects. Like if you're an ESG rapid rehousing provider, there's certain documentation you have to have. And it's sort of saying, okay, HUD outlines what has to be collected. And it's just sort of here, if we're going to enter into a contract with, families moving forward, we're going to say part of your contract is you have to use this in your client files. So you make sure you're in compliance with the HUD regs. We would also, as we are updating and going back and looking at our overall written standards, we would refer to that form that, the approved forms, and the goal would be to, obviously share, hey, here's the new form that's rolling out, but we're not necessarily having to go through the full formal approval process. It's not, this isn't please hear me, I'm not trying to say, hey, let's keep HSAC and policy and planning in the dark on anything. It's just sort of, where do we want to spend our time? Do we want to spend time talking about forms that we really can't change because HUD requires these? And being able to keep everybody in the loop and just sort of say, hey, here's the new version of this. We can walk through it, and it's being uploaded to the HSAC website or the COC website. Does that answer your question, Sharita? Oh, you're muted.
I think that answers my question. I think including them in some kind of document also helps inform folks who are interested in coming into our community and providing services and want to play ball. It kind of also gives them a place where everything lives. So I mean, I don't want us to be approving forms all day, all meeting. So I would just say if they lived somewhere where they could be accessible, but you don't necessarily have to vote on every form. Anybody else? Tammy, I know that you are a provider. Do you feel like that's something that we as a committee should go through, like all the forms, or you think kind of what I suggested work?
I feel like the lead agency should be able to manage the forms. I think as long as they're released, these are the type of forms that are going to be required when they release maybe their RFPs or whatever, that gives the agency the heads up. You make sure that you're going to be able to do that. I think it gets too in the weeds for this committee to do it. So I would agree with you. I think that it makes sense that the lead agency would manage the forms. I do think we should, like you said, have them available for folks to see that, they may be new to the community and haven't applied for city funds before, and they can kind of get an idea of what's going to be expected. But I kind of like also this kind of provides a standardization that those of us that are in the field, and especially nonprofits, have kind of like an understanding of, well, we don't have to create all these forms and try to figure out what HUD's looking for. I kind of like that there's a standardization around it.
Yeah.
It helps us to know that everybody's doing the same thing. That makes sense.
Yeah, on our monitoring, because we're in the process of monitoring all of the ESG CV contracts, and we've monitored 5 agencies so far. And there were some things that we found in common that it's sort of, okay, we need to, and HUD pointed it out and said, hey, you all need to have these things standardized. And really, if we're going to get to where we need to be, we really need to sort of come up with some standardization. I think there is going to be a place for some discussion on how and where certain things are kept. Are we doing paper files? Are we doing client notes in paper and in HMIS? And those are some things that I think are worth, policy and planning approval. But checklists seems kind of in the weeds when there really isn't anything we can change on the checklist unless there are specific Durham things that we want to add to what HUD says must be on this form. And if there's things that we definitely want to add, then we could definitely add that. I know that there's been questions on, how many people are coming from out of state or out of Durham into Durham? Well, that's not something that these forms would collect, nor would these specific providers. That would be something that would be on a coordinated entry document that we could look into doing.
Okay. So it sounds like staff is going to do the forms. They're going to live somewhere where everyone can access it. There should be any concerns, problems, or just desire to kind of learn about what's expected of the provider. We don't need to vote on that, do we?
I
Just
don't
need to
think so.
agree.
We will, when we roll out the forms and we do a training for all the providers on how to use the forms and what these things mean, the Policy and Planning Committee will be invited to that training as well.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, perfect.
So the very last thing on our agenda is white flag
Yes,
planning.
wanted to talk a little bit about that, as we need to put together an RFP to go out unless we're able to waive competition. And that's another conversation as to whether if we do white flag, we need to have money available. Open Table Ministry does have a little bit of money that they think can get them through December 31st. Depending on it. Thought I was trying to toy with, I'm not sure how much money I'll be able to find, but if we want to look at white flag and only do white flag, or do we want to try and do some sort of emergency weather that could potentially be stood up during the spring or the fall or the summer when it's really, really hot, or really, it's not freezing, but it's, 40 degrees out and heavy rains for a couple days, that we have some people who, could get really cold and uncomfortable, or have those really bad heat emergencies where people may need to come off the streets in the summers to put really vulnerable folks up. And it's not going to be enough money to help 20 or 40 people every single time if we did it year round. Wanted to kind of talk it through with the group and see what the group would recommend putting into an RFP.
That's a hard one right there.
I know. That's why I didn't want to make the decision by myself.
No, because I know for me, every time we have some kind of crazy weather event, I'm always calling, what are we gonna do? Where are people gonna go? Yes, we do need to have some kind of emergency response. I don't know. I can't. Whatever everyone's thoughts on this white flag or year-round emergency response plan.
I think it's good that we're talking about this now. We're looking at numbers that are trending up. And so I think we've gone back and forth on this so much on what to do. But I think we're going to have to make some type of decisions. I think it would be wonderful if we could come to some conclusion and maybe try it out in the warmer months like Colin suggesting before it does get to be very bad weather, the hurricane weather, the storms, the cold months. Makes sense that we tried something out in the heat. I mean, that's something that would at least give us an idea on what we could tweak as we move into the more severe weather. Not that heat's not, but I mean, we've gone back and forth on this, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but I do think we have to come up with some type of a plan. And now's the time to be just putting everything on the table, trying to figure it out.
And I don't know that I would be able to get anything in place for this summer necessarily. So it might be, the next summer, just because of the contracting process and RFP and thinking it out, since we're at June 12th.
Yeah.
It probably, an RFP, and trying to get this RFP done at the same time, people may be applying for state money and HUD COC money and having to do a city RFP at the same time. We were trying to avoid that with our combined RFP that we had out, but we had left out the white flag. There may be a way to waive competition if there's nobody who wants to do white flag provision. If we can document that, we might be able to just single-handedly award it to one organization without having to go through an RFP process. But we want to make sure we give anybody who wants to an opportunity to apply for those funds.
Did Open Table Ministry do any type of an after action report that we could learn from last year? Because I know one of the problems was that everybody wanted to go to the hotel. And so I'm just wondering if they had anything in writing that could help us to.
I could ask them to jot down some thoughts or come to our August HSAC meeting and sort of talk about it, do a debriefing.
That'd be helpful.
Colin, is there a limited pot of funding for this that would be stretched to 12 months, or is there more funding that would cover the typical white flag months and then also additional funding to cover these other months?
That's a great question, Commissioner Carter. I was talking with Drew at Open Table, and their contract was like $200,000, and they used it very, very liberally. And, they're like, it was during the cold weather months, and the contract was very, I don't want to say it was vague. We didn't say like the funds could only be used if the temperature was 32 degrees or less. So it was sort of to be used to provide emergency shelter during cold weather, during the cold weather months. And they had the ability to say, it's going to be cold this day, warm this day, cold 2 days, and rainy on that one warm day. So we'll keep people all 4 days instead of exit in and out. And there were times that just to sort of, they had the funds and people in there. So they sometimes extended maybe longer than they necessarily needed to from a cold weather standpoint, but just they had the money and it was eligible to use. So talking with them, they still had money left.
Mm,
That's why they're able to run probably another month and a half, 2 months out of what we gave them from that 200. So the thought was, if we had 200, we might be able to use it over the course of the year, but
mhm.
really, maybe much more targeted during certain pieces and say, okay, well, here's the criteria, but it would sort of allow for those derechos that come in and we need to stand something up for 1 or 2 nights in the summer, because the summer typically isn't bad, except for if we have a really, 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 really heavy rains. And some folks, early spring or fall, where you get that sudden drop in temperature and rain, can be really unpleasant. So I think your fall and spring are where you might see an extension more so than in the summer months.
Did
I
we
think
have
we
a
got-
period? Sorry, Sharita, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I was trying to remember, I feel like we had a period during this past winter when we did not have adequate funding for the need we have in our community for White Flag Shelter.
Mhm.
And so it's just surprising that there was funding left over.
So it's a challenge to know how much to spend and when.
Yeah,
Because if we were trying to house 90, we have like 93 singles and 46, so you're talking 135, 140, renting 140 rooms. If we were trying to house everybody tonight,
right.
would be, was it?
We couldn't do that.
140, was it $1,400 a night? And if we did that for 90 nights, it gets really expensive. It's sort of what we did at the Marriott RTP.
Yeah,
And essentially at that point, you've just stood up another emergency shelter. And if that's what we want to do, then that's a whole different conversation of, are we going to try and help everybody who's unsheltered? Or what we've been doing is really targeting those who are most at risk of negative outcomes, which were the most medically vulnerable, which tended to be older, more medically fragile, and families with children under the age of 5. Those were the priority groups for motel rooms. So were there some people who met those criteria that there wasn't a room for? Yes, because your challenge is trying to figure out how many rooms can you rent and get through the cold weather season. So you're kind of more conservative at the beginning. And then as the season goes on, you're like, okay, well, we've got some extra money. Maybe we can open up another 2 rooms, another 3 rooms. But then if you get another cold snap, we might have to, instead of being able to help 25 people, we might have to scale it back down to 15. Running a cold weather shelter is a challenge because you don't have a crystal ball to map out. So you're just doing the best you can to guess how many nights you'll need and how many nights and how many households you can take over the course of a cold weather season. So if you factor a cold weather season of 90 days or 120 days, and 60 to 90 of them are going to be, uncomfortable. Here's how many households can we fit with this dollar amount?
I think it's also hard to predict because at this point we're only doing it when it's cold. And I don't know if offering more year-round emergency kind of activated system will give us any additional kind of context to measure what that true need is, just because so much can change in 9 months.
Mm-hmm.
So every cold weather season, we kind of look at the one before, but if things in the community are different, is going to be, it's just the response is going to be the need, what people are willing to do is going to be different, but they're going to be willing to sleep is going to be different. It just depends, right? So I think that maybe having something more year round will help us do a better job at planning adequately for what things look like. We have more instances to compare as opposed to just winter months. I think I'm leaning towards more emergency kind of response, including white flag in that, but having something, because we do have people that when it's extremely hot and if they're diabetics and we don't have any space at UMD, that person really does need somewhere to refrigerate insulin, just different, health reasons. Sometimes folks have medications that it's really bad for them to be out in the sunlight. So it's hotter and those flag days or whatever, color coded days, when it's extremely hot, we need to keep people inside. I just feel like I think we need a year-round response. I don't know.
If we did move to a year-round response, we'd have to kind of figure out some criteria as to what would trigger outside of the cold weather season. What triggers it, and Colin,
Right.
great point. Air quality for our medically vulnerable population is a really
Right.
good thing to remember. And just because you put it into the RFP and into a contract, it doesn't force you to have to do it. And since
Right.
we're talking about something that would be starting probably December, January timeframe, if we have a really cold January, February, March, and you use all the money, there might not be money that would take you into the summer months if it was really bad. It would just be there as a, where do we prioritize this? Do we prioritize getting through the cold months? And then if there's money left, it could be used during the summer months as well. A couple different ways to look at it.
Right. Are we ready to make a decision on how to advise the lead agency to move forward with this? Are we leaning towards a white flag, only RFP, or making concessions within the RFP to be able to respond during other times in the year that we will determine at a later date? Or
This is Helen. I agree with your assessment that maybe doing this year round would give us better data to see what our needs actually are. I also, looking at EMS and how we respond to people, if we have options for them, places for them to go during the extreme heat or floods or things like that. I know emergency management does some things, but unfortunately their efforts are not always limited to Durham residents, because a lot of times they're taking refugees from other counties that are coming in and having, as emergency management, they're doing mutual aid for other counties. And so they can't always limit things to Durham residents as well, but still they may have some insight in the planning of this kind of thing too. I was thinking along the way. So, yeah, I agree. Colleen says air quality is a consideration as well. And absolutely, we get people with respiratory problems that are challenged in this kind of weather. But yeah, I agree that this is something we should move forward on.
I would also add, since you brought that about regular emergency response. I mean, I think that when the responses are, kind of activate our state level system, we can take advantage of those opportunities, but also have like a little reserve, specifically for folks. I think that's kind of good mix. I mean, we haven't had a ton of those, but we've had enough of those.
Yes.
Colin, I think we may have come to a place where we want to venture into looking at not just white flag, but a more emergency response process as it relates to emergency housing.
Okay, we can do that. And we will do some due diligence and figure out if we need an RFP or if we need a waiver of competition, depending on folks who might be interested in applying.
Do you think Open Table is going to be interested in doing something like that? Has those conversations happened when you've talked to Drew?
I mean, I think they would be open to it, but like I said, I don't know if, Sally's on the call. I don't know if Project Access would want to get into that, or if Families Moving Forward or Urban Ministries or Housing for New Hope would want to venture into that. There's, you have to have experience running an emergency shelter. You have to have, there's certain criteria. It's not something that, you can just be like, oh, I'm going to go run an emergency shelter on an emergency basis. There's certain criteria that you're going to have to meet, like access to the HMIS, being able to understand how to use it and track that data appropriately and do those things. So like I said, I don't know who would be interested in applying, and we'll start with kind of doing an interest with the providers we know who would apply. And if we've got multiple people, then we have to do an RFP. If people are like, yeah, no way, I have other things I want to do besides renting hotel rooms and checking people in and out and dealing with food all the time, and we only have one person, or we might have nobody. And if we have nobody, then it's a moot point. We'll see, do our due diligence. Thank you for the input. We will move forward on that and
Thanks so much.
see what we can come up with.
So believe it or not, you guys, it's 11:52. We're at the end of our agenda. Are there any additional questions, concerns, anything we need to address? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn 8 minutes early.
I move that we adjourn 8 minutes early.
I'll second it.
All right, Helen and
Thanks all. Have a great day.
y'all on a roll today. Helen and Tim.
I had to jump in to second it just because it was Tammy.
Teamwork.
Right, you guys.
Bye, you guys.
Bye.
Thanks all. Appreciate you.
Take care.